Youth unemployment is staggeringly high in South Africa, and in the spotlight is exactly that, young people demanding jobs. It is one of the issues that were discussed during the National Assembly's debate yesterday under the theme promoting sustainable livelihoods and resilience of young people in South Africa for a better tomorrow. Members of Parliament also discussing access to quality education, gender-based violence and substance abuse. Well, let's discuss this further now, and joining me in studio is Tshepiso Modiba. He is from ActionSA. We also hoping to be joined by the Democratic Alliance's youth leader, that's Nicholas Nyati, and we were hoping to be joined by the ANC's activist, that's Chrispin Phiri. Hopefully we are going to be joined by them as the time goes, but let's start with it, Tshepiso. Let me start by actually getting your reflections. On a day like this, we are talking about a racial attack, as that young man's mother told us just moments ago. She says this was a racial attack. And I know I'm now spinning this a whole 360 degrees. We'll get to why you're here. But when you see scenes like that in 2022, we're looking back on events that occurred back in 1976. When you see something like that, what comes to mind for you?
Greetings, Koli, and greetings to your viewers at home. Well, Koli, racism is a system, and then it must not be tolerated, more especially that you are in the democracy currently. So I believe that anyone who perpetuates racism must be taken into account. Mind you, that man abused a teenager. And then actually, besides racism, it's abuse on its own.
Yeah.
So I think your institutions like Human Rights Commission, they need to start acting with this issue of racism, because it can't be tolerated in South Africa anymore.
And I suppose, Tshepiso, it also talks to what happens in these small towns. It's not the first time that we see incidents like these happen, where black people are subjected to extreme abuse by, in most cases, are their employers, who also happen to be farmers. I'm not saying that that was the case there, but these cases are coming up more and more. Do you think that the whole issue of racism in South Africa has been dealt with properly when we see pockets now like this constantly flaring up?
Well, Koli, I don't think so. Personally, I don't think so. I believe that our laws in South Africa, they are not harsh enough to deal with issues of racism. I mean, like, in the apartheid, apartheid was declared a crime against humanity, of which racism was playing a vital role during the apartheid era. So I believe that our laws in South Africa, they are not harsh enough to deal with racism.
Let's then get to the business of why you're here. And it's all got to do with looking back at the struggles that young people fought for back in 1976, and looking at where we are today, the distance that's been traveled. Do you think that young people have a reason to celebrate?
Well, I may not call it a celebration. For me, today is about commemoration, commemorating those who have laid a foundation for us, commemorate those who came before us. So I really don't think today is about celebration, because as young people who are faced with so many issues, your unemployment, your education system, your mental health, and so on. So I believe today shouldn't be about a necessarily celebration. It should be about commemoration, remembering the past, where we come from, and then also taking that foundation moving forward.
On the line, we're also joined by Chrispin Phiri. He is an activist from the African National Congress. Mr. Phiri, thank you very much for your time. Can I start you off by reacting, and I'm not sure if you would have caught sight of this video, a young man who's said to be 16 years old in the area of Groblersdal, this is in Limpopo, beaten to a pulp by a white man who is holding a gun over him as he is doing the beating. Scenes like that, what do they evoke in your mind on a day like this?
Yeah, thanks, Kuli. I had seen the video, and I think it's completely appalling that we have people resolving their issues in such a violent manner. And I think that's something that cuts across society all the time, that when there are conflicts amongst ourselves, we choose to solve them firstly in a violent manner. But then secondly, of course, one then cannot ignore the racial dynamic at play, where you have a white man beating up a black person. And this is a scene that plays itself out very many ways in our community, time and time again. And it's only a timely reminder, or an insulting reminder, that we really have a long way to go in eradicating racist behavior and violent conduct in our society.
Well, and it prompts the obvious question that the party in which you belong, the African National Congress, has been in power now for 28 years. And does it talk to just, is it regression on the part of racial conciliation in the country, or is it certain pockets in the country that seem to be steadfast in, I guess, displaying their racist attitudes? What is it that you have not done as a governing party?
I think, Koli, what we will always see in society is people who long for the past. I think we'll always see people who long for the past and hold on to the past in many ways. And there will be people who remind us in violent ways of what the past was about. So that's what we'll continue to see in society. But we have seen society move forward in some ways as well. We have seen that South Africa has become integrated in more ways than one. But we still are a homophobic society. We still are a racist society. We still are a sexist society. And so all of these isms still remain deeply entrenched in our community. They cannot be undone by law only.
Yeah.
Social behaviors need to change. Our education curriculum is quite critical in that regard. So the work is ongoing, and I think we must desist from this idea that by virtue of the ballot, we got rid of those harsh and cruel elements in society who still believe in sexism, tribalism, xenophobic attitudes. Those will not be changed by a ballot, but they will be changed by a new generation of a new society that we are trying to build. And so it's a continuous project. That's what these type of incidents continue to remind us and continue to tell us how urgent the task remains. It's as urgent as it was in 1994. It's still as urgent as it should be today.
Sitting with me in studio here is Tshepiso Modiba, and he's from ActionSA. And I asked him the question about whether there is much to celebrate since the struggles of 1976 for young people in South Africa, and he holds the view that no, there's just way too many struggles facing young people in South Africa. There isn't much to celebrate. If anything, we need to pick up from where they left off and continue. What's the view within the ANC structures?
The view of, I think I speak for a branch really in this instance. I don't speak for many structures. But evidently, I think there has been change in society, colleagues. The privileges that we enjoy today, the society that we live in today, is in many ways a far cry from the apartheid society that we lived in before. The freedom of movement that we have, the freedom of expression that we now enjoy, shows us that we are in a completely different country. But is it a perfect society? No, we are far from being perfect. And that road still has to be really, really traversed. Like I say, we still have a lot of the isms. Tribalism is something that we hardly ever speak of as a country, but it's something that's quite prevalent.
Yeah.
We know that if you are someone from Limpopo and you find yourself in KwaZulu-Natal, you know, it's a bit of a tense conversation. These things still happen in our community.
All right.
Black communities are like white communities. So activism is required. We do need a lot more young people, older people as well, to change their old ways. We need young people to continue to be active citizens and take the cudgels of the 1976 generation forward.
Yeah.
And how we can do so is to show that we are active citizens, I believe. Just like they were. I think the 1976 march is the highest level of active citizenship that we saw back then, even though they were not even regarded as citizens in this country.
Let me ask you to stay on the line as we wrap up the conversation. Tshepiso, youth unemployment. I think that's the biggest outcry today. What do you think needs to be done to solve youth unemployment?
Thank you, Koli. You know, as young people of today, we are tired of rhetoric speeches by politicians, more especially coming from the ANC side. Young people of today need pragmatic solutions. They need pragmatic leaders who will identify solutions and then who will identify problems, come up with practical solutions. So what I think that needs to happen with the issue of unemployment, the issue here, Koli, is the education system itself. Our education system doesn't cater the needs of South Africans, more especially young people. It doesn't speak to what we aspire to be as young people. Our curriculum, it is outdated. Reality is that it is outdated. The curriculum that is being produced by our education department is outdated. You have universities producing stale courses. I mean, like, for example, Toli, currently we are in a digital world, yet universities that are producing marketing graduates using those old textbooks.
Yeah.
So I believe that our education system need to be aligned with the economy for us to prosper well, so that young people can be able to have jobs.
You make a good point there. I don't know if you heard that, Chrispin, that first and foremost, rhetoric, especially on the part of the governing party, is something that the youth of this country are frankly tired with. But more important, the mismatch between what pupils are taught in university versus what the demands of the world of work are today. Address that for us as we wrap up.
So, I mean, of course we agree rhetoric is not what we want. But, you see, therein also lies a bland statement, right? So let's blame the curriculum. If you really look at the Stats SA numbers, they'll tell you that unemployment amongst graduates has never exceeded 10%. Around 9% now, at some point it was at 8%, which means that if you have a university degree, you are highly employable. So then let's narrow the figures even further. And then so if you are highly employable with a university degree, then wherein lies the problem? It lies in the fact that it lies in either we don't have matriculants coming to the system, ending up in tertiary institutions, private colleges, etc., or the issue really lies in the throughput rate of our education system itself.
Yeah.
We know very well in this country that in grade 1, we're sitting with at least 1 million pupils who enter the education system. But when Minister Angie Motshekga announced the matric results, she's announcing at least about maybe 80,000 people entering the university system, and therein lies the problem. Why can't we address the throughput rate of our education system? What happens to children and learners ultimately in the education system? How do they disappear and filter out? And I think that's what we need to address for us to be able to ensure that we have competent skills in our economy, but also we have a competent skilled youth in the sector. So if we're not able to produce enough educated people throughout the system, or we're not able to account for the youth in the education system, inevitably we then know where they end up. They end up in our communities unskilled and not employable. And that's what we need to address. So for me, the issue is the throughput rate of the education system If we're able to get that right, if we're able to ensure that we're able to account for the million grade ones 12 years later, we would have a different society.
All right. That's Chrispin Phiri, an ANC activist. Thank you very much for talking to us on the line and in studio here. Tshepiso Modiba from ActionSA. Thank you very much for making it through and at least helping us to understand exactly what it is that young people are crying out for in this country. In picture there at the bottom of